She didn't mean to buy a motel. It was supposed to be a pit stop gas, a cold drink, and back on the road. But the way the wind curled around that rusted sign, the way the desert heat clung to the silence like it was hiding something, it felt like the place had been waiting for her. And when she stepped inside the office and found the old ledger still open on the counter, she didn't know that page would lead her straight into a secret the town had buried for decades. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this leave you thinking long after the credits roll, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because what she finds next, it changes everything. The tires crunched over gravel as she pulled into the sun-bleached parking lot. No other cars, no other sounds. Just the whine of the wind and the sharp tick of her engine cooling down. The motel stood before her like a mirage, with a backbone low-slung, sun-warped, windows darkened with decades of dust. The sign above flickered weakly. Motel. One bulb still working like it was too stubborn to quit. She stepped out, stretching legs that had driven 4 states without a plan, and let the silence settle over her. A part of her liked it too much. The real estate listing had called it a fixer-upper with potential. Desert views, endless skies, motivated seller. But the truth was, no one wanted it. The price had dropped 5 times in the last year. Locals whispered it was cursed, that it wasn't the kind of place you renovated, it was the kind of place you tore down and prayed over. But she wasn't from around here. And she didn't believe in ghosts. Only bad wiring and poor insulation. She'd been drifting since February. A suitcase, a toolbox, a beat-up FJ Cruiser, and a quiet ache she didn't talk about. When she saw the listing taped to the gas station window 3 miles back, something about it tugged, not like a scream, more like a hand brushing your arm in a crowd. Barely there, but enough to turn your head. Now, standing in front of it, keys in her hand, she couldn't explain the pull, only that it felt personal. The office door stuck before it opened. The air inside was stale and sun-baked, thick with the scent of time-old leather, dried paper, something faintly metallic. A bell above the frame jingled a second late. The front desk was still there, covered in a fine layer of desert dust. A calendar from 1996 hung crooked on the wall. Behind the counter sat a single room key on a cracked plastic fob. Room 6. Her fingers hovered over it, but she didn't touch it yet. The motel had 10 rooms, all lined up like forgotten teeth. Curtains faded, doors hanging tired on their hinges, paint peeling like sunburned skin. And yet, none of it scared her off. She'd seen worse in the cities. Violence had sharper edges. This just felt quiet, like someone had left in a hurry and never returned. A place frozen mid-breath. Her boots kicked up dust as she walked the row, peering into each room. Most were empty. One still had an old TV and a green rotary phone. Then she reached room 6. Unlike the others, this one had chains 2 thick lengths crossed and padlocked around the handle. The number plate had been scratched out. Something in her chest clenched. She stepped back, unsure why her breath hitched. The wind picked up again, whistling low through the broken window panes. And just like that, she knew. She hadn't found this motel. It had found her. She didn't sleep much that first night. The desert was louder than she expected. Wind scraping across the metal roof, sand hissing against windows, old pipes groaning like they still remembered being used. She set up camp in room 3, the only one with a working ceiling fan and a door that still latched. Her tools stayed by the bed, along with a flashlight and a crowbar she didn't admit she kept close for comfort. In the morning, she wandered the property again, notebook in hand. She cataloged each room, made a list of what needed fixing: broken locks, cracked tiles, nests in the light fixtures. But her eyes kept drifting back to room 6. It stood there like a secret, the chains catching the sun in a way that felt deliberate, like a warning meant to look accidental. The padlock was rusted, but not ancient. Someone had sealed that room within the last decade. She knelt to inspect it, and noticed something odd. The doorframe had scorch marks. Faint, but there. The paint bubbled just slightly along the edges. She touched it gently. The wood was splintered near the hinges, not like it had aged poorly, more like it had resisted something, or someone. Later that day, she headed into town. Dusty, two-stoplight kind of place. A diner, a feed store, a post office, no bigger than her motel office. She asked the man behind the counter at the hardware store about bulk paint and padlock cutters. He squinted at her, then asked, "You the one who bought the old Holloway place?" She nodded, bracing for a joke, but he didn't laugh. He just set the box of screws down slowly and said, "You keep that place closed up at night, yer? Especially that room on the end." Her stomach tightened. "Room 6? He didn't answer. Just handed her the screws and told her the coffee shop closed early. The woman at the diner was more direct. "Some things ain't meant to be opened," she said while refilling her water. "You should sell that place back. Let it rot, like it was supposed to." But no one gave her details. No one said what happened. Just vague warnings, sidelong glances, and one teenager at the gas station who whispered, "They say if you sleep in there, you don't wake up the same." Back at the motel, twilight bled across the sky in bruised purples and copper streaks. The chains on room 6 clinked in the breeze, like they were stirring. She walked past quickly, but didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, she stood behind the front desk and pulled open every drawer, searching for keys or answers or even a receipt. She found a small ring of spare keys, tagged and numbered, but room 6 was missing. Then, she noticed it. Under the bottom drawer, taped to the wood, one single key, untagged, old, and blackened like it had been through fire. She didn't touch it. Not yet. She left the key where it was for 3 more days. Not out of fear, at least. That's what she told herself. But because the rest of the motel demanded her attention. The roof above room 1 had partially collapsed, and the water heater was coughing like a dying animal. She patched walls, scrubbed tile, swept away years of mouse droppings, and tried to forget the way room 6 seemed to watch her. But even when her hands were busy, her mind wandered. Back to the scorch marks. Back to the warnings. Back to the key, still tucked under the drawer like it was hiding. At night, the motel changed. The wind no longer sounded like wind. It whistled, but not randomly. It felt patterned, like breath. The temperature would drop suddenly near room 6, even though the desert heat still radiated off the pavement. She checked the windows, sealed every crack, yet the chill returned every night cold that bit through denim and made her teeth ache. Her flashlight started dimming too quickly, even on new batteries. And once, while walking the hallway with her work gloves still on, she swore she heard someone whisper her name. She turned. No one. She hadn't told anyone in town her name. The draft grew stranger with each passing night. It didn't sweep through the whole building, only near room 6. The other rooms were still and dry, but room 6 breathed. She could hear it now, faintly, when everything else was silent. A soft, rhythmic pulse, like air moving through lungs that had no body. She pressed her ear to the door once, hand on the cold chains, and held her breath. There was something inside. Not movement exactly, but awareness. The kind that exists when you know someone's in the room behind you, even if they haven't made a sound. One morning, she opened the door to the office and found sand scattered across the floor. Not just tracked in, dumped, like a desert wind had exploded inside. But the windows were shut. The door was locked. And at the center of the sand, something had been dragged. 2 lines, spaced like shoulders. She followed the marks with her eyes. They led all the way to the desk, and stopped at the drawer with the key. That night, she dreamt of fire. Not flames, but heat, rising fast. In the dream, she stood in room 6. Everything was blackened. The mirror on the far wall was cracked, and a single eye looked back through it, not hers. She woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat, and though it was nearly 90 degrees outside, the inside of room 3 was freezing. She rose before dawn, hands trembling, and walked barefoot to the office. The air was still. The sand was gone. But the key under the drawer had shifted. It was no longer taped in place. It was sitting neatly on the counter, waiting. The sun was barely over the ridge when she stepped into the office, but the heat was already climbing. Dust floated in slanted beams of morning light, catching on every surface like memory. The key sat where she'd left it center of the desk, unmoving, but impossibly heavy with meaning. She stared at it for a long time, then reached out and slipped it into her pocket, like it had always belonged there. She didn't open room 6 that morning. Not yet. Instead, she opened every cabinet, every drawer, every inch of the office with surgical attention. Something told her she was missing something, not just a clue, but a context. There was history here, layered like sediment, and she needed to understand what kind of story she'd stepped into. It was behind the back panel of the old filing cabinet, a warped section of plywood, pried loose with the flathead screwdriver from her tool belt. Tucked between the wood and the wall was a thin leather binder, almost the size of a ledger, its edges frayed and corners curled from decades of dry heat. When she opened it, a thick cloud of dust rose. Inside were pages upon pages of handwritten entries, dates, names, check-ins and checkouts, guest notes, in faded blue ink. But then she noticed something strange. A pattern. Room 6 had no checkouts. Every person assigned to Room 6 had a check-in date, a signature, but no exit. Some entries had comments beside them. Strange ones. Didn't show up for breakfast. Left room light on all night, but car never moved. Loud crying sounds called sheriff. No record. One entry was scratched through so violently the paper tore. There were no entries past 1,997. Tucked near the back of the binder was a folded envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with brittle wax. The front read only, "To the next owner." Her fingers hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typewritten, but with handwritten notes in the margins. The letter began plainly, "If you're reading this, then you own the Holloway Motel. I won't wish you luck, because I doubt that's what brought you here." Her throat tightened. She read on, "There's a room you've already found, Room 6. If you haven't opened it, don't. If you already have, it's likely too late to undo what's been done. This isn't superstition. It isn't ghost stories. It's something older. The kind of thing that hides in plain sight until someone pays attention." Her hands trembled. The letter continued, "My brother stayed in that room. So did the girl before him. So did I. I left the motel, but it never left me. The door doesn't just trap people. It remembers them. And sometimes, if it wants to, it shows them to you. I've boarded it up 3 times. Others have done the same. But it always finds a way to open again. The desert doesn't keep secrets. It just buries them shallow." At the bottom, a signature. E.H. Holloway. She sat down slowly, the letter trembling in her lap. The ledger was open beside her. A breeze swept through the room. But none of the windows were open. Room 6, it seemed, was never really locked. He arrived just before dusk, the hour when the desert turns gold and everything looks softer than it really island. She was out by the back shed, fixing the electrical panel, when she heard the tires on gravel. It was an old pickup, gray with rust along the fenders, a single suitcase strapped down with bungee cords in the bed. The man who stepped out was tall, maybe mid-50s, with a weathered hat pulled low and boots that had seen more miles than most people. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, hand resting on the doorframe of the truck, staring at the motel like he was seeing something that wasn't there anymore. Finally, he turned to her and said, "Got a room?" She hesitated. Something about him felt familiar. Not his face that was new, but the way he spoke, slow and measured, like each word had weight. She nodded, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Room 4's got clean sheets and working plumbing. It's not much yet, but it's dry." He smiled faintly. "Dry'll do." They walked back to the office. She handed him the key and watched as he wrote his name in the guest log. Just C. Reeve. No address, no phone number, just a name, looping and deliberate. As he handed the pen back, he looked her in the eye and said, "You've got your hands full here." She laughed lightly. You have no idea. He didn't smile back. Actually, I might. That night, she couldn't sleep. The air felt wrong, heavier somehow. She kept thinking about the way his eyes lingered on room 6 as he walked past it. Not with curiosity, but with recognition. Like someone greeting an old wound. Around midnight, she heard movement outside. Footsteps, gravel shifting. She peeked through the blinds. The man was standing outside room 6. Not moving, not touching the chains. Just watching. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. Eventually, he turned and walked back to his room. The next morning, his pickup was gone. But he left something behind. It was folded and tucked beneath the front door of the office. A single newspaper clipping, brittle and yellowed. The headline read, "Local girl vanishes from desert motel. August 14, 1974. She stared at it, heart thudding. The article was short. A girl named Eva Holloway, age 16, disappeared while staying at the family-run Holloway Motel. No sign of forced entry. Room found locked from the inside. Parents devastated. Investigation inconclusive. There was a photo, black and white, grainy. A girl smiling beside a desert sign. Hair in braids, a hand shielding her eyes from the Sunday. The girl in the photo looked like her. Not just similar, not just vaguely familiar. Like her. Same jawline, same eyes. Same half-smile that always leaned more to the right. She felt her knees buckle and grabbed the desk for support. It didn't make sense. She whispered, "Who are you?" But she didn't know if she meant Eva, or the man who left the photo. She didn't sleep after that. Couldn't. The photo, the clipping, the name Eva Holloway, all of it looped through her head like a song she didn't remember learning. She spent the next day trying to lose herself in work, scraping paint, rewiring a wall fan in room 2, organizing the tool shed. But her eyes always drifted back toward room 6. The chains hadn't moved. The key was still in her pocket, heavier now. Or maybe it was her heart. By sundown, something in her broke. Curiosity, fear, maybe defiance. Maybe the sense that this place had given her too many half-truths, and it was time to stop waiting for answers to be delivered by strangers in dreams. She walked to the room with steady feet, but shaking hands. The chains clinked softly as she reached for the padlock. It took some force, but the rusted metal gave way with a dull snap. She pulled the chains down slowly, like unwrapping a body. The key slid into the lock like it had never been removed. One soft turn, a click. The door creaked open. The air inside hit her like a wave, cold, dry, and wrong. It wasn't just the temperature. It was a dead stillness, a vacuum that felt too quiet. Like sound didn't belong there. Like breath wasn't welcome. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Not because she wanted to, but because she felt she had to. The walls were scorched, not blackened, but brown and brittle, like they'd been exposed to smoke that no one ever aired out. The floor creaked under her weight. The furniture was still there. A bed frame, rusted and skeletal. A small dresser with one drawer missing. A side table with a melted lamp, warped plastic frozen mid-drip. On the far wall hung a mirror, large, old, covered in a thick layer of soot. She walked toward it slowly. There was no reflection. She blinked, wiped her sleeve across the glass. Nothing, not even the room, just black. Like the mirror was a window to nowhere. Then, faintly, something shimmered. A flicker, like light trying to push through water. For a split second, she saw it a girl's face, not moving, just watching. She stumbled back, heart racing, the air impossibly cold now. On the floor near the bed, something caught her eye, a child's shoe. Small, faded red canvas, one lace missing. It sat alone in the corner like it had been waiting to be found. Next to it, a suitcase. Leather, scorched along one edge. She knelt beside it and flipped the latches open. Inside, folded clothes, a diary, and a boarding pass from 1974. The name read, Eva Holloway. Her hand hovered over the diary but didn't open it. Instead, she stood, staring at the soot-covered mirror. That girl's eyes were burned into her now. Not just remembered, felt, like she'd left something behind in this room. Something unfinished, and somehow, it was now hers to complete. The suitcase stayed on the office desk all night. She didn't open the diary. Couldn't. The weight of it felt too real, too raw, like opening it would mean admitting something she wasn't ready to face. She slept with the lights on and the door locked, though she knew neither would help if whatever lived in room 6 decided to follow her. And still, her dreams burned faces in firelight, words she couldn't hear, the soft thump of footsteps walking just behind her. When she woke, there was ash on the soles of her feet. By mid-morning, she forced herself back into room 6. The air was colder than before, the kind of cold that didn't belong in the desert. She wore gloves this time and kept her flashlight on even in daylight. The mirror was still black. The child's shoe still sat where she'd left it, untouched. But now her attention shifted to the bed, a rusted metal frame with springs sagging like broken ribs. Beneath it, something caught the light. She dropped to her knees and pulled aside the brittle mattress frame. A loose floorboard creaked under pressure. She pried it up carefully and saw a cardboard box wedged into the space below, wrapped in layers of old newspaper. She lifted it out. Dust billowed. The smell was sharp, mildew, metal, smoke. Inside were reel-to-reel audio tapes, at least 5. Each one labeled in shaky handwriting, Tape 1, 7, 12, 74, Tape 2, 7, 13, 74, and so on. The last one read simply, Tape 5, Final. She didn't have a real player, but the library in town did. The woman at the desk gave her a strange look when she explained what she needed, but showed her to the archives room without asking questions. An hour later, she had the machine humming in front of her. She threaded the tape, pressed play, and held her breath. The voice was male, steady, low, and tired. July 12th. Holloway Motel. Room 6. A pause. Breathing. Eva's been gone 3 days. Room still locked. No sign of entry. I don't know what's happening, but I'm starting to think she didn't leave. The voice cracked. I've stayed in this room now for 2 nights. Every time I close my eyes, I see her, not in dreams in the mirror. She doesn't speak, just stares. Sometimes she's closer. Sometimes her hands pressed against the glass like she wants out. The tape hissed. I think the motel is, I don't know, feeding off us, off grief, off memory. It doesn't want us to move on. It wants us to relive, to rot. I can hear my wife crying from room 3, but when I check, she's asleep, mouth closed, no tears, just silence. But the sound, it's real. Room 6 is doing something. The next tapes were worse, static growing louder, his voice more frayed. On tape 5, his tone changed entirely. This is not a room anymore. It's a mouth. It opens. It consumes. Eva's still in there. But she's not alone. If you find this, I'm sorry. I tried to seal it. I tried to forget. But it always finds someone new. Whatever you do, don't look in the mirror too long. It looks back. The reel spun out. She sat there, the hum of the machine in her ears, her fingers ice cold. Outside, the desert sun still burned bright. But inside her, the chill of that room and that voice settled deep. And it wasn't going away. The tapes had cracked something open in her. Not just fear, but understanding, or the beginnings of it. That room 6 wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It didn't creak and groan and flicker lights for fun. It remembered. It replayed. It opened itself to the grief of whoever entered and fed on whatever they tried to forget. The idea made her stomach turn. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about pain that never learned to leave. She spent the next day trying to trace the name from the tapes E.H. Holloway. The surname matched the motel's old name, but there was no recent record of a Holloway in the town registry. She scoured newspaper archives, county records, even old phone books. Most had been torn or faded from Sunday. But then, In a dusty manila folder at the Historical Society, she found a fire report from 1974. The document was brittle, typed, and water-stained, but the facts stood out in clean, bureaucratic lines. Structure fire reported at Holloway Motel, room 6. August 14, 1974. No fatalities confirmed. Origin of fire, inconclusive. Local sheriff ruled incident as accidental. But in the margin, someone had written in pen, Eva, still missing. Room sealed. No remains. She read the sentence 3 times before realizing her hands were shaking. When she brought the document to the counter, the elderly volunteer there looked at it and sighed. That motel still standing? She nodded. The woman hesitated, then leaned in. That room. There was talk. Always was. After the fire, the girl's parents closed the place up for a while, said they'd rebuild, but they didn't. Not really. Just patched it over. You know what I heard? She didn't answer. That girl, Eva. They say she set the fire herself, but the sheriff covered it up, didn't want it making the papers, said it was just an accident, said the room was empty when they found it. But those of us who lived here then? We remember the smoke. We remember the scream. The woman looked past her, out the window. And we remember how the mirror in room 6 didn't crack from heat, like the others. It melted inward. She left the records office with the report, and a mind full of questions. If Eva had tried to burn the room or escape through fire, why did no one talk about her? Why were there no follow-ups? No missing posters? No search party logs? It was like she had been swallowed whole, not just by the fire, but by the town's silence. Back at the motel, the wind had picked up, gusting harder than usual. The old sign groaned on its hinges, and a dust devil swirled through the parking lot. The sky turned that deep red gray that only desert storms could make. She stood outside room 6, watching the door rattle faintly in its frame. The scorch marks looked darker now. Fresh. She didn't dare open it again. Not yet. But she knew one thing for sure now. This motel hadn't just witnessed a tragedy. It had housed it, protected it, fed on it, and it wasn't done yet. She didn't plan to return to room 6 that night. But some pull subtle, steady, impossible to argue with guided her feet back to the door just after midnight. The motel was still, blanketed in desert hush, but she felt something waiting. Not lurking, not hunting waiting. Like whatever lived inside the room had been patient long enough. She brought the diary with her this time. Eva's. She hadn't opened it until now. Sitting just outside the door, back pressed to the crumbling stucco wall, she turned the brittle pages by flashlight. The handwriting was neat, looping, teenage. The first entries were ordinary notes about school, desert heat, boys with greasy smiles. But about halfway through, the tone shifted. Room 6 is cold even when the sun burns your skin outside. Mama says it's just bad insulation, but she won't sleep in there either. She says it dreams too loud. A few pages later, I keep seeing someone in the mirror. She looks like me, but her smile is wrong. Like she's wearing my face the way someone wears a coat that doesn't fit. Then, near the end, I'm going to try the fire tonight. Not to destroy it, just to weaken it. I think there's something inside the glass. Something that needs me to see it. She read those final words 3 times. Then slipped the diary into her jacket and opened the door. The room felt different now. It didn't feel cold. It felt expectant. The soot on the mirror had faded, and she could see her reflection for the first time. Pale face, tired eyes, hair tied back. But something was wrong. Her reflection blinked out of sync. Just a fraction of a second off. Enough to feel like someone else. She stepped closer. Slowly. The edges of the glass shimmered like water touched by wind. The mirror was no longer a surface, it was a veil. She raised her hand. The reflection raised hers. But instead of mirroring the movement, the reflected hand pressed against the glass. Like it wanted out. She stared, frozen. Her breath shallow. And then, something clicked, soft, metallic. From within the mirror frame, just beneath the corner where soot still clung, a tiny compartment opened. She hadn't seen it before. Wouldn't have, if the mirror hadn't cleared. Inside was a small brass key. She reached forward and took it. Cold. Heavy. Older than the others. Not a room key. This one was unlabeled, ornate. She turned it over in her hand. The teeth were jagged, like they'd been filed by hand. And then she knew this key didn't belong to a room. It belonged beneath the motel. There was a trapdoor. She'd seen it once, a warped slab in the floor of the maintenance shed, padlocked and half buried in sand. She hadn't paid attention before, thought it was just access to plumbing or crawl space. But now, she knew better. The motel had hidden a secret in its bones, and this was the key to open it. The wind howled through the motel as she crossed the lot toward the maintenance shed, the brass key burning cold in her hand. Clouds swallowed the moon, and the sand shifted beneath her boots like it didn't want her to go further. She pushed open the warped door, the hinges groaning, like they hadn't moved in years, and shone her flashlight across the dust-caked interior. There it was in the far corner, a trapdoor she had once ignored. No markings, just an iron ring and a rusted padlock. She hesitated, breath tight, then knelt and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Too smoothly. The lock dropped open, the ring lifted, and the hatch creaked upward, releasing a breath of air so cold it made her eyes water. She coughed, the scent of charred wood and old earth thick in her throat. A narrow staircase led downward into complete blackness. She swallowed hard, then descended, one step at a time, flashlight beam trembling across the stone walls. The further she went, the more she realized this wasn't a crawl space. It was a room intentionally built. Square, sealed, hidden. At the bottom, her light fell on something unexpected. A stone slab, waist high, like an altar or a tomb. Dust thick on the surface. Scratched into the stone were letters so faint she had to wipe them clean to read. Eva H. She staggered back, pulse pounding in her ears. But the slab wasn't a grave. Not exactly. She circled slowly and found a latch on the side. A heavy one. Heart hammering, she opened it. Inside were bones. Small, human, wrapped in scorched cloth that still smelled of smoke. And beside them, a journal. Not Eva's. His. The father's. She sat on the floor, dirt and dust in her jeans, and opened it. The first entry was dated the night of the fire. I lied. To the sheriff. To my wife. To God. Eva didn't start the fire. I did. I thought if I burned room 6 it would die with her. But it didn't. It stayed. And it wanted more. Another page. Eva didn't disappear. She changed. I saw her in the mirror, long after her body was gone. She spoke without moving her lips. Said the motel chose her. Said she was staying. Said she wasn't scared anymore. Said it needed someone to hold the sorrow. She kept reading. I buried her here, because the motel told me to. It said if I left her above ground, the others would follow. That grief spreads. That sorrow multiplies. I didn't know what else to do. I thought silence would be safer than truth. The last line was scrawled, frantic. If you're reading this, you're part of it now. You always were. She sat still for a long time. The cold seeped into her skin. The bones in the slab looked impossibly small now, as if time had shrunk them. She reached out, brushing ash from the journal's spine, and whispered, Ava, I'm sorry. A sound behind her soft, like cloth brushing stone. She turned. The mirror was there. She hadn't brought it, but it stood in the corner, upright, unbroken, its glass shimmering in the dim light, and in the reflection stood Eva, not crying, not pleading, just watching. Then slowly she smiled. For the first time, it wasn't twisted or wrong. It was warm. A thank you. The mirror went still, and just like that, the cold receded. Back above ground, the wind had calmed. The motel was quiet. The stars blinked awake in a sky scrubbed clean. She closed the shed door gently, locking it again not to trap something in, but to seal Something closed. Later, she framed Ava's journal and hung it in the front office, right beside the ledger. Room 6 remained locked not with chains, but with peace. The soot was cleaned, the mirror gone. The curse, or whatever it had been, no longer stirred at night. But sometimes, when the wind shifts just right and the desert goes still as glass, she hears laughter in the distance. A girl's, not haunted, just free.